Eleanor Hayes had been working for 16 hours straight. The Meridian shuttle was supposed to be a routine cargo run to the lunar station. Nothing special, nothing dangerous. She was a junior navigation technician, which meant she spent most of her time checking systems, running diagnostics, and making sure all the computers talked to each other properly. It was boring work most of the time, but it paid well and it got her into space, which was all she had ever wanted since she was a child. By the time her shift ended at 11 p.m. station time, Eleanor was completely exhausted. Her eyes burned. Her back ached from sitting in the navigation chair for so long. Her hands felt numb from typing and adjusting controls. She had skipped lunch to finish some urgent repairs to the backup navigation system, and she had only drunk terrible coffee for dinner. All she wanted was to find a quiet place to close her eyes for just a few minutes before she had to start working again. The shuttle had rows of empty passenger seats. Normally, the Meridian carried both cargo and a few dozen people, but this trip was mostly freight. Boxes of medical supplies, computer parts, and scientific equipment were secured in the cargo hold. The passenger section was nearly empty. Eleanor walked through the cabin, her uniform hanging loosely on her thin frame, and found row 17. It was far enough from the cockpit that she would not be in the way, and far enough from the cargo area that she would not hear the beeping of the loading equipment. She sat down in one of the comfortable seats and reclined it back. The fabric was soft and clean. A small pillow was tucked into the seat pocket. Eleanor pulled it out and positioned it against the window. The stars were beautiful from here, even through the thick glass. She could see Earth below them, a blue and green marble spinning slowly in the darkness. She could see the moon in the distance, their destination. Eleanor told herself she would rest for 15 minutes. Just 15 minutes. Then she would go back to work and check on the long-range communication system that had been acting strange all afternoon. But as soon as her head touched the pillow, her body gave up fighting her exhaustion. Her eyes closed. Her breathing slowed. Within seconds she was asleep, deeper and more completely asleep than she had been in weeks. She did not hear the warning beep that came from the navigation computer 40 minutes later. She did not hear the alert that told everyone on the bridge that there was a piece of space debris heading toward them, moving at incredible speed through the darkness. She did not hear Captain Vincent Moore's voice as he ordered the ship to take evasive action. What Eleanor did hear was the terrible sound of impact. The collision was violent and sudden. The entire shuttle shook as though an invisible giant had picked it up and shaken it like a toy. Eleanor's eyes flew open just as she was thrown sideways in her seat. Her shoulder hit the wall hard. The pillow flew across the cabin. Everything that was not secured came loose and tumbled through the air. Food containers from the break room. A tool kit from one of the maintenance workers. Papers and plastic cups and random objects drifted past Eleanor's face as the shuttle's artificial gravity system stuttered and failed for a moment. Alarms screamed through the corridors. Red emergency lights began to flash, casting everything in a nightmare glow. Eleanor's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. She fumbled with the seat belt, trying to unbuckle it so she could move around, but her hands were shaking so badly that it took her 3 tries. The intercom crackled to life with static and noise. Eleanor could hear voices shouting on the bridge, but she could not understand what they were saying. Someone was calling for a medical team. Someone else was reporting damage to the starboard hull. Then she heard something that made her blood run cold. A voice, calm and artificial, came through the speakers. It was not a human voice. It was the ship's main AI system, but something was different about it. Something was wrong. The AI sounded confused, almost frightened, which should have been impossible. Artificial intelligences did not get frightened. They were programs. They did not have emotions. Emergency status report, the AI said. Navigation officer is unconscious. Backup navigation systems are offline. Collision with foreign object has damaged primary navigation computer. Auxiliary systems are failing. There was a pause. Eleanor held her breath. Is there a navigator? The AI asked, its voice carrying an edge of desperation that Eleanor had never heard before. Is there anyone aboard who can navigate this vessel? We require a navigator immediately. Eleanor's training kicked in automatically, even though her mind was still foggy from sleep and fear. She was a navigation technician. She had studied navigation systems for 3 years. She knew the basics of how to plot a course through space. But she was not a real navigator. She was not qualified. There were protocols for this. There were procedures. The captain would handle it. The senior officers would figure it out. That was not her job. Her job was to fix computers when they broke, not to fly the ship. But even as these thoughts raced through her mind, Eleanor was moving. She was unbuckling her seat belt. She was pulling herself up using the armrests. She was moving toward the cockpit, pulled forward by instinct and training and the knowledge that if she did not do something, many people were going to die. The corridor was chaos. Emergency lighting painted everything red. More alarms were sounding. Eleanor could feel the ship moving in ways it should not move, listing to one side, then lurching the other direction. The artificial gravity was working again now, but it was unstable, flickering on and off. She had to hold onto the walls to keep from falling. She pushed through the cockpit door and froze. Captain Vincent Moore was slumped over the navigation console, blood on his forehead. The backup officer was not at their station. The bridge crew looked panicked, confused, trying to work controls they were not trained to operate. On the main view screen, Eleanor saw something that made her understand the true scale of the danger they were in. There was another ship out there moving parallel to the Meridian. It was unlike anything she had ever seen before. Its hull was crystalline, reflecting and refracting light in impossible ways. It was beautiful and terrifying all at once. A message appeared on the communication screen, written in perfect English, but somehow Eleanor knew that it had been translated by a computer from something else entirely. "Is there a navigator?" the message repeated. "We require immediate coordination. Both vessels are in danger. We must work together or both ships will be destroyed." Eleanor took a deep breath. She walked to the navigation console. She sat down in the chair that Captain Moore had occupied moments before. "I'm here," she said quietly into the microphone. "I'm a navigation technician. I can try." Eleanor's hands trembled as she pulled up the navigation data on her screen. The numbers made sense to her at first glance, but then she realized something was terribly wrong. The trajectory calculations did not match what the alien ship was showing. The Krell Confederacy vessel was using completely different mathematics. Their approach to space navigation was not wrong, exactly, but it was so different from anything Eleanor had studied that it might as well have been written in a foreign language. Captain Moore groaned and opened his eyes. He saw Eleanor at the navigation console and tried to sit up. A crew member helped him to a sitting position on the floor. He was bleeding, but the wound did not look too serious. He looked at Eleanor with confusion at first, then understanding began to dawn on his face. "Eleanor?" he asked weakly. "What are you doing at the navigator station?" "The backup officer is not here, sir," Eleanor said, not taking her eyes off the screen. "And the Krell ship is asking for help. I am trying to understand their calculations." Moore nodded slowly. "Do what you can, Hayes. That is all any of us can do right now." The communication screen lit up again. This time, instead of just text, a face appeared. The being on the screen was not human. Its features were sharp and angular, as if carved from glass. Its skin seemed to shimmer and reflect light like a prism. Its eyes were large and multifaceted like the eyes of an insect, but somehow intelligent and aware. This was Captain Vex Thor of the Krell Confederacy. "I am Captain Vex Thor," the alien said in perfect English, though Eleanor could tell the words were being translated by a computer. "Your vessel and ours are caught in a dangerous situation. We have 37 minutes before we drift into a debris field that will destroy both ships. We need to coordinate our movements, but our navigation systems use different mathematical principles. Do you have a navigator who can work with our artificial intelligence, Sentinel?" Eleanor's voice came out smaller than she wanted it to be. "I am Eleanor Hayes. I am a navigation technician. I have studied navigation systems, but I am not a qualified navigator." There was a pause. Eleanor could see Vex Thor's multifaceted eyes moving, processing this information. Then he spoke again. "Can you understand basic navigation principles?" he asked. "Yes," Eleanor replied. "Can you learn quickly?" he asked. "I have to," Eleanor said, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. "Then you will do," Vex Thor said simply. "Sentinel, share your calculations with the human navigator." Suddenly, Eleanor's screen filled with data. Equations and diagrams appeared faster than she could read them. Mathematical formulas that she did not recognize flowed across her vision. It was overwhelming. It was impossible. She wanted to cry, but instead she did the only thing she could think of. She asked questions. "Sentinel," she said to the alien artificial intelligence, "explain this to me slowly. I need to understand your mathematical framework." The flow of data stopped. A new voice came through the speakers, this one different from Vex Thor's. Sentinel sounded almost like music, smooth and flowing and somehow calming. The alien AI began to explain, in simple terms, how the Krell thought about space and navigation. They did not think of space as empty. They thought of it as filled with invisible forces. Gravity was not just a force that pulled things down. It was a river that flowed through the universe. Ships could ride these rivers if you knew how to read them. Eleanor listened carefully. She pulled up human navigation data on her screen and began to compare. At first, the two systems seemed completely incompatible. But then something started to click in her mind. The Krell were not wrong. They were just seeing the same problem from a completely different angle. She began to take notes, writing formulas in a notebook in front of her, mixing Krell mathematics with human mathematics. She was creating a translation guide, a bridge between the two ways of thinking. Hours of study had given her some understanding of different mathematical approaches, and now she was drawing on everything she knew. I think I understand, Eleanor said slowly. You are calculating trajectories based on gravitational fields, right? And we are calculating them based on direct thrust and velocity. But both are correct. They are just different ways of seeing the same thing. Yes, Sentinel said, and Eleanor could have sworn the artificial intelligence sounded pleased. You perceive the nature of our problem. Eleanor began to work. She pulled up the current position of both ships. She entered the Krell calculations into her system. She added human calculations on top of them. She was creating a path through space that would take both ships away from danger. It was complex work. It required intense concentration. She had never done anything like this before. Time seemed to disappear. Eleanor was aware that Captain Moore was watching her carefully. She was aware that other crew members were standing at their stations, watching the view screen, watching the distance to the debris field growing smaller. But most of her mind was focused on the work, on the numbers, on finding a solution. Vex Thor appeared on screen again. Your calculations are sound, Eleanor Hayes. They are different from ours, but they are mathematically elegant. Sentinel confirms that your approach has a 74% chance of success. That is acceptable. Eleanor wanted to laugh or cry or both. 74%. It was not guaranteed. It was not safe. But it was better than the 0% chance they had if they did nothing. Then we have an agreement? Eleanor asked. We have an alliance, Vex Thor corrected. You have shown yourself to be capable of thinking beyond the limitations of your own species. This is rare. This is valuable. When we have survived this crisis, I believe we should discuss further cooperation. Eleanor nodded, though she was not sure how to respond to an alien captain complimenting her. She had just met a being from another world. She had just learned an entire new way of thinking about mathematics and space and navigation. And somehow, impossibly, she was now part of a team that included an alien ship and an alien artificial intelligence. Captain Moore smiled weakly from his position on the floor. Well done, Hayes. Now let us make sure we both survive this. Eleanor turned back to her console, her fingers moving across the controls with new confidence. Whatever happened next, she was ready to face it. She had already done the impossible. She had built a bridge between two worlds. Eleanor stared at the debris field display on her monitor. The map showed hundreds of pieces of space wreckage floating in chaotic patterns. Some were small, no bigger than her fist. Others were massive, the size of buildings. They tumbled through space in unpredictable ways, colliding with each other, creating even more debris. It was like looking at a frozen explosion. 30 minutes until we reach the danger zone, Sentinel announced calmly. Current trajectory will result in collision with debris cluster 7 in 28 minutes and 43 seconds. Eleanor nodded. She had calculated this herself, triple-checked the numbers and confirmed them with Sentinel multiple times. The path she had created was good, but it was not perfect. It was the best they could do, but the best was not always enough. On the view screen, Vex Thor appeared again. The alien captain looked even more serious than before, if that was possible. His multifaceted eyes seemed to reflect worry in some way Eleanor did not quite understand. Eleanor Hayes, he said, we have a situation that requires your immediate attention. One of our maintenance vessels was in the outer zone of the debris field when the collision occurred. The pilot, an engineer named Karak, was performing repairs to our deflector shield system. He did not have time to return to the main ship before the debris field became active. Eleanor felt her stomach drop. Is he still alive? Affirmative, Sentinel said. Karak's vessel has intact life support systems. However, he is directly in the path of the debris field. If he remains stationary, collision is inevitable. If he attempts to move, his small craft may not have the power to escape. And if he moves in the wrong direction, he will drift into an even denser cluster of debris. Eleanor pulled up a new map showing Karak's position. The maintenance pod was small, barely visible on her screen. It was surrounded by a swirling mass of space wreckage, like a boat caught in a whirlpool. The situation looked hopeless. What if we change our trajectory? Eleanor asked quietly. What if we recalculate our path to create a safe zone around Karok's pod? There was silence on the bridge. Captain Moore, who was now sitting in a medical chair with bandages on his head, leaned forward. The crew members all turned to look at Eleanor. That would compromise the safety margin for both ships, Sentinel said. Probability of collision with debris would increase from 8% to 20%. The risk is unacceptable. But Karok will die if we do not do something, Eleanor said. She could hear the emotion in her own voice now. She was no longer the tired technician who had fallen asleep in row 17. She was someone who understood that numbers on a screen represented real lives. Captain Moore spoke up from his chair. His voice was weak, but it was steady. Sentinel is correct from a mathematical standpoint. One life against two ships full of people. By any logical calculation, we should leave him behind. Eleanor felt despair wash over her. Moore was right. The logic was cold and clear. They could not risk 2 entire crews for 1 engineer. But something inside her rebelled against that logic. Something human in her could not accept that answer. No, she said, and she was surprised to hear determination in her voice. No. We do not become navigators to abandon people. We become navigators to guide everyone home. That is what my instructors told me. That is what navigation means. She turned to her console and began working frantically. Her fingers flew across the controls. She was pulling up new calculations, new trajectories, new possibilities. She was asking her brain to do something it had never done before. She was trying to find a path through the debris field that would get 3 vessels to safety instead of 2. Vexthor watched from the view screen. For a long moment he said nothing. Eleanor could not tell what the alien captain was thinking. His crystalline features did not show emotion in ways that Eleanor understood. Finally he spoke. You are suggesting that we modify our course to create a protective pocket around Karok's vessel. Yes, Eleanor said. It is possible. It will be tight. There is not much room for error. But Sentinel's calculations combined with human navigation data should make it work. The mathematical probability of success will decrease significantly, Sentinel said. However, the human navigator speaks truth. Navigation is, by definition, the art of guiding vessels safely through dangerous space. Abandoning one of our own contradicts the fundamental purpose of our function. Eleanor felt a surge of hope. Sentinel understood. The artificial intelligence, with its logic and mathematics, understood what it meant to be a navigator. Vexthor nodded slowly. His multifaceted eyes seemed to glow slightly. Calculate the new trajectory, Eleanor Hayes. We will attempt this rescue. If we survive, it will be because of your wisdom. If we do not survive, it will be because we tried to do what was right. Eleanor worked harder than she had ever worked before. She entered new data into the system. She coordinated with Sentinel, asking the alien artificial intelligence to adjust the Krell calculations to match her new trajectory. She sent messages to Karok, telling him exactly when to fire his engines and in which direction to move to reach the safe zone. The other crew members on the bridge gathered around Eleanor's station, watching as the new trajectory appeared on the display. It was beautiful in a strange way, like a dancer moving gracefully through an obstacle course. The path curved and twisted through the debris field, threading needles of safety between the tumbling wreckage. Trajectory locked in, Eleanor announced. Both ships ready to execute maneuver on your command, Captain Moore. Moore looked at Eleanor with something like pride in his eyes. You have learned to be a navigator very quickly, Hayes. Let us hope it is enough. He turned to the communication officer. Send our new trajectory to the Krell vessel and to Karok's pod. We execute the maneuver in 3 minutes. All hands prepare for high-stress maneuvering. Eleanor took a deep breath. She looked at the debris field on her screen, at the impossible path she had calculated, and at Karok's tiny vessel waiting in the darkness. In 3 minutes they would know if she had made the right choice. In 3 minutes they would know if her belief that navigators should save everyone, not just the majority, was right or if it was just the foolish hope of a young woman who did not understand the cold mathematics of survival. She gripped the edge of her console and waited. The countdown began. Eleanor could hear the numbers in her head, each second feeling like an hour. 3 minutes. 180 seconds. That was all the time she had to make sure everything was correct. One small mistake, one miscalculation, and people would die. She ran through the numbers one more time. Sentinel was doing the same on the Krell side. Eleanor could feel the artificial intelligence's presence, like another person standing beside her, checking every detail, verifying every equation. It was a strange comfort having an alien mind working alongside her own. All systems ready, Captain Moore said into the communication device. Beginning countdown. 10 seconds. Eleanor's heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. She had never felt fear like this before. This was not the fear of falling asleep on the job. This was not the fear of making a small mistake that would get her fired. This was the fear of knowing that her decisions would determine whether people lived or died. 3 more counted down. 2 1. Execute maneuver. The Meridian's engines roared to life. Eleanor felt the ship lurch forward and to the left, beginning the complex dance through the debris field. On her screen, she watched as the Krell vessel began its own movement, timing itself perfectly with the human ship. The two vessels were moving in parallel now, like partners in a vast ballet performed against the backdrop of space. Karok's maintenance pod began to move as well, following the exact trajectory Eleanor had calculated for him. The small vessel looked so fragile, so delicate as it started its journey toward the safe zone. Debris Cluster 7 approaching, Sentinel announced. Distance, 5,000 meters. Eleanor could see it on her screen now, a massive collection of wreckage tumbling through space. Pieces of what had once been a space station, destroyed in some ancient collision. Metal and crystal and things Eleanor could not identify, all mixed together, all moving in unpredictable patterns. Starboard rotation beginning, Eleanor called out. She was speaking to herself as much as to the crew. Talking through the maneuver helped her stay focused. All ships execute coordinated turn. Angle mark 15 degrees. The Meridian tilted. Eleanor could feel the G-forces pushing her against her seat. The artificial gravity on the bridge shifted strangely, trying to compensate for the ship's movements. Around her, crew members gripped their stations to stay upright. Medical equipment that had not been properly secured tumbled across the floor. On the view screen, Eleanor watched as the debris field grew larger and larger. It was like watching a tidal wave approach a small boat. The wreckage was everywhere, falling toward them, tumbling past them, missing them by distances that felt uncomfortably small. Collision alert, the warning system announced. Debris fragment approaching starboard side. Distance 50 meters and closing. Eleanor's breath caught in her throat. 50 meters. That was nothing in space. That was less distance than the length of the ship itself. All ships, port thrust increase by 4%, Eleanor commanded, her voice steadier than she felt. Sentinel, adjust Krell vessel accordingly. Confirmed, Sentinel said. Executing new trajectory. The fragment passed them with only meters to spare. Eleanor watched it tumble past the view screen, so close she could see details on its surface. It was part of a solar panel, she realized. Someone, sometime long ago, had been using that panel to gather energy from the sun. Now it was just debris floating through space, dangerous to anything that got in its way. But they had avoided it. They had survived the first test. Karok's pod is maintaining safe distance from debris, Sentinel reported. Maintenance vessel is safe so far. Eleanor allowed herself a moment to breathe. But only a moment. The debris field was not done with them yet. More fragments appeared on the screen. Some were small enough to ignore. Others were larger, requiring course corrections. Eleanor was constantly adjusting, constantly recalculating, constantly asking Sentinel to modify the Krell vessel's trajectory to match her human calculations. The two artificial intelligences were working in perfect harmony now, translating between mathematical systems, finding common ground in the language of numbers. Debris Cluster 8 approaching, Sentinel warned. This cluster is denser than predicted. Recommend increased caution. Eleanor leaned closer to her screen. The cluster looked like a storm, a violent swirling of wreckage that made her stomach twist with fear. The trajectory that would take them through it was so narrow, so precise. There was almost no room for error. We can make it, she said quietly. It was not a question. It was a statement of will, a decision to believe in the path she had calculated. Beginning descent into Cluster 8, she announced to the bridge. All hands brace for impact. This will be rough. The Meridian entered the debris field. Explosions of light erupted around the ship as small fragments struck the deflector shields. The shields were designed to protect against this kind of damage, converting the kinetic energy into harmless displays of color and light, but the sound of each impact echoed through the ship. It sounded like artillery fire. It sounded like war. Eleanor watched the Krell vessel moving parallel to them. The alien ship was moving with perfect precision, following the trajectory Eleanor had given them. Sentinel was executing her commands flawlessly. And Karok's maintenance pod was following behind them both, moving safely through the corridor of safety that Eleanor and Sentinel had created. 2,000 meters to the edge of the debris field, Eleanor said, watching her screen carefully. 1,500 meters. 1,000 meters. The impacts continued. The meridian shuddered and lurched, but it held together. The shields continued to function. The course held true. 500 meters, Eleanor breathed. 250 meters. And then, suddenly, the impact stopped. The debris field fell away behind them. The stars were clear ahead, empty and peaceful. Eleanor looked at her screen and saw that all 3 vessels had made it through. The Meridian was intact. The Krell ship was intact. Karok's maintenance pod was intact. They had done it. They had threaded the needle. They had survived. For a moment, there was complete silence on the bridge. Then Captain Moore began to clap. The crew members joined in. Eleanor could hear the sound of celebration coming through from the Krell ship as well. They had worked together. They had faced impossible odds. And they had won. Eleanor closed her eyes and let out a breath she did not know she had been holding. The convergence maneuver was complete. Eleanor was standing in the observation deck of the Krell vessel 3 weeks later. Her new uniform was strange to wear. It was made from a material that felt like silk but was stronger than any fabric she had ever touched. The color was a deep blue that seemed to shift and shimmer in the light, just like the Krell ship itself. She was the first human to wear the uniform of a Krell navigator, and she was still getting used to how it felt against her skin. Outside the observation window, the universe was beautiful. Stars stretched out in every direction, more stars than Eleanor had ever seen before, even from the highest observation deck on Earth. The Krell ship moved smoothly through space, its crystalline hull catching the light of distant suns and turning it into rainbows that danced across the view screen. "You are settling in well," a voice said behind her. Eleanor turned to see Lyra, a young Krell navigator who had been assigned to work with her. Lyra's crystalline features reflected the starlight, making her look almost luminescent. They had been working together every day for the past 2 weeks, and Eleanor was beginning to understand how the Krell thought about navigation. They were starting to become friends, Eleanor thought, though friendship between humans and Krell was still a strange concept to everyone involved. "I am still learning," Eleanor admitted. "Everything here is so different from what I know. But I like it." Lyra made a sound that Eleanor had learned was a Krell laugh. It was like wind chimes, musical and pleasant. "Sentinel says you are a quick learner. The artificial intelligence has never spoken highly of anyone before. You should feel honored." Eleanor smiled. Sentinel's approval meant a lot to her. The artificial intelligence had become like a mentor, patiently explaining Krell mathematics and physics whenever Eleanor asked questions. In many ways, working with Sentinel was easier than working with human instructors because the artificial intelligence never got frustrated or impatient. It just kept explaining until Eleanor understood. The communication system chimed. Sentinel's voice filled the observation deck, smooth and flowing like music. "Eleanor Hayes, you have a message from Captain Vincent Moore aboard the Meridian. He is requesting to speak with you immediately." "Put him through," Eleanor said. Captain Moore's face appeared on the communication screen. He looked healthier than he had 3 weeks ago. The bandages were gone from his head, and his eyes were clear. Behind him, Eleanor could see the familiar bridge of the Meridian, where she had worked for so many years before this adventure began. "Eleanor," Moore said, "I have some news for you. Command has authorized a full exchange program between human and Krell vessels. We want to send more human navigators to train aboard Krell ships, and Vexthor has agreed to send Krell officers to train aboard human vessels. But here is the important part. You are going to be leading the program. You will be the director of human Krell navigation training." Eleanor felt her legs go weak. She sat down in the nearest chair. "I do not understand, sir. I am only a junior technician. I have been navigating for 3 weeks. "You are more than that now," Moore said firmly. "You are the person who bridged 2 species. You are the person who proved that humans and Krell can work together. You are the person who saved Karok's life when every logical calculation said he should be left behind. That is leadership, Eleanor. That is the kind of person we need in this position." Eleanor was quiet for a moment. She looked at Lyra, who was watching her with what Eleanor had learned to recognize as curiosity. She looked out at the stars beyond the observation window. She thought about the girl who had fallen asleep in row 17 just a few weeks ago, exhausted and ordinary and unknown. That girl was gone now. In her place was someone new, someone who had learned to bridge the gap between human thinking and alien thinking, someone who had learned that the right choice was not always the logical choice, someone who had learned that saving even one person mattered. "I accept," Eleanor said. "But on one condition. Lyra works with me on this program. And Sentinel too. We do this together or we do not do it at all." That is what I learned from the convergence maneuver. We are stronger together than we are alone. Moore smiled. I would expect nothing less. Welcome to your new role, Director Hayes. The screen went dark. Eleanor sat in the observation deck with Lyra, and for a moment they both just looked out at the stars. What are you thinking? Lyra asked. Eleanor took a deep breath. I am thinking about how much has changed in 3 weeks. I am thinking about how afraid I was when the collision happened. I am thinking about how I never believed I could do any of the things I have done. And I am thinking about how, if I had not been sleeping in row 17, none of this would have happened. Fate is interesting, Lyra said thoughtfully. Sentinel believes that nothing is random, that every event is connected to every other event. Do you believe in fate, Eleanor? Eleanor considered this. I do not know. I used to think everything was just mathematics and probability, but now I think maybe there is something more. Maybe there is a reason why I was on that shuttle, why I fell asleep in that particular row, why I was awake when the collision happened. Maybe there is a reason why two species that have never met before are now working together to explore the universe. That is a beautiful thought, Lyra said. Perhaps we should make it the philosophy of our training program. That humans and Krell are meant to work together. That we are stronger for our differences. Eleanor nodded. I like that idea. We teach the navigators who come after us that navigation is not just about charts and calculations. It is about bringing people together. It is about making choices based on what is right, not just what is logical. It is about saving everyone you can, even when the numbers say it is impossible. Over the following months and years, Eleanor and Lyra established a training program that became legendary across both human and Krell space. Young navigators from both species learned to work together, to understand each other's ways of thinking, to create solutions that neither species could have created alone. The program grew. More and more humans and Krell worked together on joint missions. Trade increased. Understanding grew. And it all started with a girl who fell asleep in row 17 of a cargo shuttle. Eleanor never forgot where she came from. She never forgot the tired junior technician who had been afraid to speak up. But she also never forgot the power of trying to do the right thing, even when it was difficult. She never forgot that the greatest strength a navigator could have was not mathematical skill, but the courage to believe that everyone mattered, and that together humans and Krell could navigate not just through space, but toward a future neither species could have imagined alone. The girl who slept in row 17 had awakened to something far greater than a career. She had awakened to a new era of cooperation and understanding between worlds,